Welcome, Freedom Fighter 1776. I'm your host, Mark Bashaw. We've got another episode for you today. We're continuing forth with the Natural Law series, and we've got a senior fellow from the Natural Law Institute, Bryan Brey. And so we're going to be talking about some of the concepts that he's been working on. And before I do that, I'm going to dive into a little bit about his bio and then have him go more in depth. So Bryan Brey, valedictorian, international baccalaureate, UCLA political scientist, entrepreneur, investor, and cryptocurrency enthusiast, which I think we'll dive a little bit into towards the end, and maybe have him back for a deeper dive into that. He's also a speaker, Natural Law Institute senior fellow, like I talked about, and developer of MythMatrix, and how to be the hero of your own life story. So that's kind of the genre of the topic today. Welcome, Bryan. How to be the hero of your own life story. Talk about it, but also give us a little bit more about yourself, sir.
Yeah, hey.
And thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good to be here with you. I think the first time we met was Boston when you presented there. That was our first Natural Law. That was kind of the kickoff event, and it was great that it was in Boston. Well, not Boston, but Boston, general Boston area.
Salisbury, Mass. Yeah, that was a good time. That was cool. I didn't know anything about the Natural Law Institute or the fellows. I just knew Brandon Hayes, President Natural Law, and I happened to grow up with him. And so when I jumped into it, I was like, what are they doing here? And it's captivating, and it is extremely intriguing, the work you all do over there.
Yeah, I got involved with the guys in about 2014 or towards the end of 2014 when I was actually working on this MythMatrix work. I was kind of doing the second phase of it, honestly, which was, I don't know how deep we'll get into it, but in terms of bio and introduction, my introduction to those guys was around then. It was a Canadian friend of mine said, "Oh, you got to meet this dude, Bill Jocelyn." And Bill Jocelyn, I don't know if you knew the sheepdog, but he was kind of applying natural law to the family. And he was arguing with Kurt and Eli was in there, Steve Pender, a bunch of guys. It was just really high level debate, and found out Kurt called it King of the Hill, and it's adversarial competition. You basically make the ideas compete. And to me, it was really invigorating. It was the best space on Facebook at that time. And I think if there's a very short synopsis of, kind of who I am, I don't like to say single dad, but a father has been a big thing for me. And it kind of comes out from my shadow. I was raised without my father, and that was a pretty deep wounding. And I knew I didn't want to have that curse go on to my children. I do have two. I've got a daughter who's in college. She's a little more on the umbrella of her mom and always been guided and protected by her. And then I raised my son pretty much solo. But we were just laughing about it last night that I raised him in Hawaii for the most part. And now we're in Tennessee, and everybody loves his backstory. It's like, raised in Hawaii and went to a circus art school. So he's just, he's captivating for people, which is what goes into this storytelling. And I was telling you a little bit earlier, the power, kind of the most important stories are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. So my son's got a good start for leading out a lot of his stories, and I'm delighted about that. So I'd say being a dad is probably what I'm most proud of, and that can lead to a lot of things, but I think it's a very grounded space to be in.
Awesome. I have your presentation, MythMatrix, right here. We can kind of go through it, but also you're talking about how to be the hero of your own life story. How do people screw that up in this time and space that we find ourselves in, right? What are examples of people screwing that up? And why is it that men and women keep on offloading their power to somebody else to seemingly solve their own problems?
Yeah. Well, I think we keep screwing up because we're not being modeled the correct way. We do a lot by imitation, and there is some adversarial competition if you have a bigger family. I mean, the studies are pretty clear that children are happiest. Just two factors: a mother and father who love each other, and a lot of brothers and sisters.
Mhm.
And you had Luke on. I mentioned Bill previously, this idea of applying everything towards the family. Um, there's another fellow, Pat Ryan. I was on a call with him and he was just ripping the young guys on the call. And he said, if you're not having children, you don't matter. Like literally, you will not matter in the future because none of you and your genetics and anything that you've learned and the effort you put in is going to go proceed into the future. So
Right.
when you say, why are we not on the same page, or men or women, it isn't as much of like, well, she did this and he did that or whatever. But if we are not directed, we don't have the same outcomes for, this optimal, like putting that, say, hey, happy children because a mother and father love each other and lots of brothers and sisters. Well, you get a man and a woman, a mother and a father that are on the same page. I think you're winning, right? Like that there is an aspect of how to be your hero in your life story that fits naturally into that. If we go into the slide some, you'll see
Yeah.
there's a
Let
lot
me
on
pull that up.
archetypes, and the archetypes are going to have, well, let's do from a woman is going to have from a virgin to a queen to a crone. The shadow side is going to be the whore, the femme fatale, and the hag.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're just getting that. That's the intro. I know there's a lot of slides in here. If the audience knows, Kurt has said that I don't necessarily tell people how much depth that I've put into this magnum opus, and it is a tremendous amount of work. But it's one of those things that when you lock in and it's just something you're passionate about, it doesn't necessarily feel like work. It kind of feels like a game that
Right.
you're trying to win.
Yeah.
So finishing that on the man side would be, yeah, here you go. This is getting into the light and the shadow side. Yeah, you go from a coward, tyrant, misers on the masculine. Would be a hero, a king, and a mentor. So the idea is that if we can have some imitation and we can pattern, you have a mother and father that are strong and they're king and queen and they're loving each other, then obviously that makes modeling a lot easier, and you're less likely to accept frauds. But I will
Right.
say that no one can individuate. So there's going to be 2 points that we're going to emphasize here: is this idea of individuating, like becoming who you are as a solo single one, like your deal, has a lot to do with integrating your shadow, which is to take those wounds, like the wounds that I had. You don't vomit and project those onto others and make yourself a victim. You integrate and you get everything out of that shadow.
So
Uh,
kind of
to,
like what
to,
we see here.
yeah, it's to become your own unique version of your light that has, kind of the coloring. And then that second thing is the integrating is it goes to the anima and the animus, and that's going to be a little further in. It's a little. I'm not saying that it's heavier, but it has more depth of like, if you had an ideal mother and father, then and you have that internalized, that's the integration of it, then you can kind of tap into, well, my mother would say XYZ. It's like the anima is basically the sum total of how we think and feel about women in our life, internalized. The
Mhm.
animus is that sum total of men within in a woman's psyche. Now, if she is a leftist, progressive, orange man bad, she doesn't necessarily have a strong role model father figure. She just has a strong like shadow side that's not even integrated, right? It's just badgering her internally, and she thinks she sees that everywhere. So it's individuating and integrating is a really big deal. It's a really
Mhm.
big deal, and if we don't do those steps, then probably everyone and everything looks like an enemy.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I would argue that this is purposely not delving into, because it allows an individual to understand who they are and be able to integrate those those personas that they have. Like, whereas they're just running wild with just the psychological manipulation and whatever it is they've been programmed to believe, but they don't actually I feel like this is a solid way to self-evaluate.
Yeah. And it should go to the group level too. There's in my Heroism Wins presentation, I talk about when we go from the MythMatrix, there's this bell chart that you guys would get into, and it basically takes those 10 story patterns and fits them into 5 pairs that go from life sucks, my life sucks, I'm great, which is superhero tales and dude with a problem, to we are great, to life is great. And what I encourage is that if you take those 3 leading ones, I'm great, we're great, and life is great. What's encouraging about Kurt Doolittle's work is that I think he's done a lot on the life is great. That from first principles, that life itself is programmed to be reciprocal. Natural law, that science of decidability and cooperation, is that we are wired and programmed so that we don't have retaliation cycles. This natural law of reciprocity is that all interaction should be voluntary, productive, fully informed, warranted, free from the imposition of costs on others. That's a pie. That's not a literal, but a figurative pie that can get bigger. Everybody can participate that. And that's what we're basically are saying are the rules of the game. And there are people out there that don't play by the rules. They think rules are stupid, or their God's better, or their God's chosen. And just to tie these 2 ideas back together, if you're not integrating your shadow, you're going to think that Hitler was the most evil man ever, right? And you're just going to preach that rather than trying to integrate. Well, what was it? We talk about the importance of self-reflection, and that there are certain people, probably for reasons that they never want to self-reflect because it benefits them not to. And that ties back into Kurt saying that so much is driven by people's incentives.
And how overtly do you feel it's become completely overtly obvious to like you have a presentation, Depose Tyrants?
Yeah.
Right. And do you feel like this time period we're living, it's become overtly obvious to these incredible, immense defects going on in society, to where the Natural Law Institute, what you all are doing there, it's just, it almost like feels like a common sense just solution to what's going on?
Well, I do like to say that there's very big themes that go on. And that's, maybe children, women, people don't tune into it. Obviously, it's going to have an impact. But every movie is effectively one mind trying to solve a problem. And the theme is what the central question is. For folks that have done, English classes, you obviously dig into stories and you try to ask these things. But a theme is that back and forth. And we've had some very core themes. This idea of deposing tyrants has been a major, major theme that we've done over and over. It's kind of like almost like the Marvel universe,
Right?
Of how many times we address the deposed tyrants. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And this last 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, it's just been overtly tyrannical, to where a lot of people are tapping into this information and navigating how to depose these tyrants.
And let's add a clarification. One of the things we like to do at Natural Law Institute is kind of think in 3 ways. We disambiguate, we serialize, and then we operationalize. To disambiguate is to define it differently than what it's like near, but it will usually give you access to series. And if you listen to Kurt, you'll probably pick up that he tunes in very quickly to a series, and he'll give you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the series. The last one, operationalize, is effectively more in that verb space of what has to be inputted, like what does this do in relation to that, and when you change this factor or coefficient. I kind of like thinking of like water, steam, and ice. Like what factors, what operations are going to change within that series of what you're trying to disambiguate. So, what I was going with, I think, in terms of these themes and repeating themes, is that you can see that they're different, and what are they solving for there? What are they doing operationally? Did you want to dig into this depose tyrants a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important. First off, for the audience, what from your standpoint, from your frame, deposing tyrants specifically, what is that? What is your frame of that?
Well, scroll down a bit more. If I recall, I did a whole series of
Let me
the
know when to
founding
stop.
fathers. Yeah, I had a lot of the founding fathers, and that it's programmed into it. Yeah, there's a good one there. Keep going.
Sorry, there might be a delay.
Okay.
I don't know if you see this one.
Yeah, I see tyrant. Yeah. Consent of the governed is a big theme.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about this. Let's dive into this real quick, because this is huge for what's going on continuously right now, and specifically the last 5 years.
Yeah. If I recall, is depose tyrants, consent of the governed. There's also federalism, or the factor around state rights. And we really have to look at what the original intention is. I guess what I'll share with the audience is a recall I did. So my work on MythMatrix came from even at UCLA with political science. I had a minor in business studies, but I also did theater arts. Not enough to get a minor in or whatever, but I had an improv class, I had a director's class, I had some of these other things. And what I guess I lost the thread on that. What I was going for is that okay, MythMatrix. Wow. I'm pretty excited about this stuff, and I was digging into it, but I guess I lost it.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we're jumping in. So let me just go back here. We're kind of scrolling through state sovereignties, historical context of the 10th Amendment, deposing tyrants.
Yeah, that's good. The deposing tyrants is just, there were so many quotes in there of the cautions from the founding fathers of tyranny. That was the clarification I wanted to make earlier, is that I want our audience in disambiguation to understand the difference between authoritarian and totalitarian, or tyranny. Authoritarian is going to tell you what not to do. This is the king leans into he can veto, he can say no effectively, even to the parliament, or even dissolve parliament. When you're totalitarian or tyrant, they tell you what to do. It's a via positiva. That's the one that's more dangerous.
Yeah. And can you give examples of the past?
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah, all those medical mandates at the risk of losing your job, employment, and whatever else. And then on top of that was this echo chamber of, I'm sure you posted those charts of like the Democrats that if you don't take the shot, they want you in a camp, they want you fired, they want you this. They're very punishing, and I think that shows up a lot for a tyrant of forcing their will. There is a thing here on men, if we go back to that hero and king and mentors, forcing your will on others, but you can force your will for good or for ill. And I do think the founding fathers tried to put a lot of efforts in there, that it was mostly framed in via negativa with some clarifications what our rights are. And the other thing I kind of want to dig into on your trailer or little preview slide thing about inalienable or unalienable.
Unalienable.
But both are important if you see that, because you can't put a lien on it, right? Like you
Right.
can't sell it out or borrow against it or collateralize these
Uh,
things.
And
But
that's why, yeah, that's why I primarily use unalienable. You can't put a lien on it.
and then I
Exactly.
guess the other disambiguation would be the alienable is to make it, you can't make it alien to you.
Hmm.
So these are native or natural rights that you, no matter what you do, you can't make your right of free speech or self-defense or bearing arms. You can't make that alien to yourself. So both. Anyway, it's not to be semantic or pedantic or whatever. It's just to encourage the audience that they ought to dig into ideas a bit more, because not only do you get a better understanding, but you get more grounds to share that with others. Like, okay, now that resonates with me, or now that means something to me.
Yeah. And it should resonate more and more these days. After, like you said, we went through this whole period of time where it's like, no, you have to do this or else. You have
And
to
how
do
much
this
was
or
it
else.
storytelling, right? Like, how much was it fear porn? And
How much
how
was
many,
it
a lot of
psychological
these,
warfare? Yeah.
yeah,
How much was it psychological warfare?
exactly. And so, have the skills to understand the power of storytelling. And I do, we get into it a bit more at the end. I like to triangulate between society, economy, and polity, and that we also have that triangle. There's a lot of triangulations in natural law for anybody who gets introduced to it. There's this idea where you have seduction and words and kind of like the church, and
Hmm.
then you have the economy, which you'd also say like there's laws that are in here, but largely it's trade or enforcing trade or punishing, or you get a fine or you have to pay this retribution or something, is kind of in this middle. And then the other one is force. I was just mentioning that when you force your will upon others, it's through violence, right? So you have this scale from words and seduction all the way to force and violence. And so Kurt's work was largely like, okay, how do we try to direct more actions and interactions towards voluntary free trade? Well, there's an asterisk there, because we don't have free trade in that sense, because we have a co-opted uh, banking cabal monopoly type thing, right? Like,
Oh
we would
yeah.
have to have adversarial competition in the economic space as well to really
We
and we need all three levers.
yeah.
We do need the power of good narrative and story, which obviously I'd like to see as truthful, full accounting, dynamic, passionate stories that connect at a level of relationship. That's another big thing. You go from a relationship to agency, and men are big on agency and systems, and women are big on relationship. But you see, relationships are shattered because we don't have strong families. And so
Right.
therefore they start sending their nervous system out to foreigners and to whoever they perceive as the most harmed, and rather than just directing their energy on their 5 to 8 children, and down the road, the 50 to 80 grandchildren and great grandchildren. That's where relationships are, but that's been destroyed at this point. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but I know you can handle it. You
Oh, this is good.
understand.
No,
You
this is
understand it.
yeah, and for the audience out there, if you're kind of spinning your head, it's like go over to the naturallawinstitute.org, start tapping into this stuff and applying it into your own life. You'll find that it makes complete 100% sense. Now, before we jumped on, you talked about, yeah, a lot of this is objective, but can you talk about the subjective nature of kind of your work and application of it, and the differences between the two? Because I'm very objective, like, evidence-based facts, here it is, lay it out, here's the reason, things like that. But from your side of the house, the subjective nature of storytelling and how that is applicable.
Yeah, and I think that was the connection to college, was that power of storytelling. I was telling a story to my uncle about my fraternity, happenings. And there was a lady at the table that she said, hey, have you thought about being an actor? And I go, oh, no, my lawyer, my grandpa's a lawyer, and I'm going to be a lawyer. And she goes, well, lawyers and actors are the same thing.
That's well, attorneys.
Yeah, right. Well, she was Victoria Burrows. She was a casting director for the movie Contact, and she asked me to come into her casting studio in LA. And that's kind of what she said. Hey, you're at UCLA. You should take some classes. And that's what got me introduced to that world. And it was a big deal, man, because one of the other kind of, I wouldn't say exactly it's a dichotomy, but you have intuition and you have intellect. And the intuition side, women are real strong on. That's not mean that they're accurate. They're usually really bad at true false, but they have a feeling for good and evil, which can be hijacked, and it has been hijacked very easily. I think true false and this idea, to shout back to that animus. The animus is the return of their all their ideations about a man or male in their world. And so if they have a good father, they tend to have very rational, reasonable, and they can discriminate and discern, and they have a lot more like logic and reason gets ingrained over a longer time. So
Right.
Part of this thing of storytelling is the arc, because there's also, for men and women, there's this time preference. Women tend to be in time. It's always now. When they tell you you're a jerk, you think they're saying you're a jerk forever and ever. You've always been a jerk, but what they mean is in this instant moment, you're a jerk.
Right.
And when we say, unfortunately, when we say you're a bitch, or you're whatever, you're this or that, men, we tend to mean for a long duration. So that time preference thing. But back to the storytelling, I was emphasizing stories that are told over a long time. So a lot of biblical and religious stories. And if we do start to move into this thing of some of the other stuff I shared with you, man, these themes of like the return of the father is such a big deal. Like religion basically is most of them is we want our king, we want our big father to return, because why? They bring order, they bring justice, they bring usually fertility and health, and they bestow blessings. And we long for it, right? And the feminine, or women, even if they're complaining for it, you've seen it before, like there's so many memes that are out there. If he's a handsome, charismatic, awesome dude, and it doesn't have the weight of all the publicity or whatever media machine, lying media, then they just go, yes, daddy, like.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So subjective.
Exactly.
So subjective, like that intuition. It's probably going to be a lot of work, but usually in the third act, you see it in a lot of films where the hero joins this is Kim Hudson's work on The Virgin Promise, who talks about that a lot. For them, it's not a hero's journey. That theirs is more of a tale of that they find some inner light. There's some special gift and talent that they have, and that they get caught shining, and then the kingdom can't handle it, and then they have to go out on their own to the forest, and they kind of develop their skill with the shining of the light. But effectively, they have to make a choice if they're going to choose the light or if they're going to choose the kingdom. And they often choose the light. And then typically there's a prince that helps them in the third act to then bring that back to the kingdom. And then there's some sort of mass conversion in the kingdom. And it's like, okay, we accept you have this totally unique, gifted talent. Like I'm thinking of Brave, and she was a really good warrior or something like that, which, is way out there. And it's of the probabilities is 0.000 something before that actually happens. But it's powerful in terms of storytelling, and the idea of the prince helping them. What I think in reality, is that we need women to join men, because it's going to help break the hypnotic spell. And that's why you get to see some of these conservative women become pretty popular, because we're trying to snap the victim mentality, that subjective, like, oh, you're oppressing me. Well, the king is really trying to empower you. And it's the king and a lot of these choices, like, no, that's not healthy for you. That's not going to work out that way. And if they didn't have good family formation, they didn't have brothers and sisters to fight about ideas. They didn't have brothers and sisters, some that made mistakes and others that won, where they can kind of figure things out at a really relational, emotional level. Then, of course, they get hijacked by powerful narratives of good versus evil, and they think that everything they're doing is good and that everybody opposing them is evil.
Yeah. You think it's sped, like you talked about, the individual going out into the woods, finding the light, right? And tapping into that, coming back into the kingdom. Do you think in reality, in the last so many years, when they forced isolation, do you think it sped up individuals to tap into that light and then be able to integrate back? Or like, I'm just trying to use, kind of juxtapose it with real world example of like what happened the past 5, where they isolated a lot of individuals and they put them in like a box over here, and they were able to tap in. A lot of them are, in my opinion, a lot of them are waking up and tapping into that discernment, higher level consciousness, whatever you want to call it, and then coming back into this just absolutely ridiculous situation.
Yeah, you saw it with the mama bears, right? That started to show up at school council meetings and things like that, and just started ripping into them, and it was glorious, right?
It was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was glorious.
Well, they bring an emotional tenor, like men. Just like as a good warrior, we don't want to be provoked or driven by rage. We want to have a very clear foresight of what we're doing, and you would know this for military, in terms of, you obviously don't want friendly fire, you don't want collateral damage. There's so much of where we tune in that maybe we don't have the compelling the compelling testimony that is highly emotional. And man, I mean, I hope if listeners and viewers get anything out of this, is to just keep coming back to the power of, like, look, sometimes it's said as divine feminine and divine masculine, but if we are so complementary and made to work with each other to solve problems. A lot of these are delusional. You know how this AI thing, it's like, oh, AI is hallucinating and it's spitting out garbage. It's like, a lot of the stuff, it's hallucinations and spitting out garbage from just a terrible script. I joke with the guys that this world movie that we're all in is so bad that most people want to leave the theater, because the good guys aren't winning and the bad guys aren't getting the comeuppance.
I've heard somebody say it's a really bad James Bond movie. Like the worst James Bond movie you could ever imagine.
Yeah, that franchise has really jumped the shark recently.
But going back to the economic side of the house, I know you're a cryptocurrency enthusiast, and I know we're kind of switching gears here, but I want to talk about this.
Sure.
The economic stranglehold that has been on the people for so long in the transactional process, where we're a capitalistic society here in the United States, but still where it's crony in the fact that we're all tied into this centralized central bank notion of transacting and then manipulation upon the usury on top of things. How do you envision digital assets, cryptocurrencies? Do you see them sliding in to change that, and where we have legitimate level playing field transactional technology we could tap into?
Yeah, I'm bullish crypto. I'm very optimistic crypto, with some caveats. There's some things that will help clear up, but a couple things. One, in terms of capitalism versus communism, both seem to be morphing into this uniparty, which kind of brings me back to this whole biblical thing where Jews or Pharisees or whatever the temple thing decided that it wasn't just enough to go give freely, right? We talk about voluntary, productive, fully informed, all of that. No. Your tithes, your offerings had to be exchanged for a coin
Right.
of that realm, right?
Yeah.
And that's that centralization. And I think a lot of things went downhill from there because um, they started to then put a valuation on it. Maybe they do an accounting. Maybe they say you didn't give as much as last year. You need to give this much or whatever. Whatever the sick, sadistic thing that the challenge is, it becomes a unit of account, and that's one of the things that we talk about. Money has to have three factors. It's got to be a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a unit of account. Well, the problem is the US dollar is the global unit of account. Whatever they do, they tend to make it like, well, what is it in US dollars? That kind of advances their aims. We may want to have a unit of account, but there are more, like they call it, four factors of production: that you have land, labor, capital, and technology. I think that there's a fifth that is kind of in a realm of natural law. That, well, is it reciprocal, voluntary, productive, fully informed, which gives you those other five. But so I would love to see some sort of crypto that moves into, we could take our 300 to 3,000 guys and we could each pledge 100 hours and we could put that into a shared crypto treasury. Then that's what, 300,000 hours or 3
Right.
million hours, man
Yeah.
hours, right? And then maybe we have some land offerings. Maybe you don't necessarily sell it, but you'd be willing to lease it at a very low rate, $1 a year or something. And so now we have land offerings and we put that into the treasury. Maybe we do
Right.
have some capital that we can put together. So in terms of cash or cash equivalents or whatever, we can put that into a shared treasury where it's pledged or deposited, and that we can make smart investment with it. And then a lot hinges on technology. And you'd know more than anybody that typically it's the advancement of death technologies or weapons that kind of lead the charge for all the
Right.
other technologies, because we do have to protect ourselves. So be it rail gun or lasers or anti-gravity or whatever, dude, we've got smart people out in the space that could probably advance a lot of technologies that could protect us. And then the last one I add is that if none of those things are balanced through this natural law reciprocity, that bigger pie that I talked about earlier, then we're not playing a game by our rule set. We're kind of playing by their rule set. And they kind of like render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. There is some truth to that. Is like, we don't even have a competition. So if we get to the CBDC or we get to whatever, I mean, I don't care as long as they don't ban competition. Like,
Right.
I'm not necessarily against a federal bank aside from a very strict ownership, as long as they still let state banks. Like, we'd be in an alternate timeline if state and federal banks both existed.
Right. Because right now they picked the winner.
Yeah.
They pick the winner, and they don't truly let the free market pick the winner. And so what we have is we're stuck on this fiat. It's not even, I don't even want to call it the US dollar. We're stuck on this fiat central bank privateer digital, already a digital currency. For those people out there that are freaking out, oh, we're going to have a CBDC, you're already on one. You're on the worst kind of one, in my opinion. They don't even print money anymore. They just put dots and tittles on a screen and then send it. And so, and then on top of that, you got the pharisaical legal system that enslaves us with all this complete garbage legalese. And we're not even talking about real laws. We're just talking about legalese that's all tied into that centralized, monopolized fiat system. So it'll be really, what are your thoughts on some of the legislation? What are your thoughts on some of the executive orders we're seeing? I don't think a winner should be chosen, but I think as long as there's an ability for the free market to pick the winners, the free market to use the technology that actually works for them, and we're not being pigeonholed. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I think there's that Martin fellow, not our Martin, the other Martin guy who talks about public money and private money. That typically you'll see that once a space allows enough public money to go in it, that the returns are small. Like a lot of venture capital are looking for 10x, 100x, 1000x type of return. So you have this private money, and crypto came out of all things. It was the push from the banks being dumb in 2007 and 2008.
Right.
Now, I'm a little more on the conspiracy side of like, man, I don't know, this Bitcoin kind of popped out of nowhere. There was a
DARPA.
lot of digital alternative money type of conversations were happening, but could it be a DARPA, CIA rollout? Likely.
Well, and it's being incredibly based on what I've seen, based on the research I've done, it's been incredibly manipulated by the whole Tether stablecoin 1-for-1 kind of deal. And then on top of that, you get the question of hashing power, 55% in a certain nation state boundaries. How does that kind of play into the whole network? It's
yeah, I mean, we are pointing fingers towards the answer. Is kind of ties back to that same thing when I got introduced to natural law. You got to have adversarial competition, but let's make that triangulation between, hey, let's cooperate, let's compete, which can be a fun competition. We're getting better. Like a lot of crypto, they copy each other's smart contracts and maybe they add something that can be a friendly competition. But then you have actual conflict. And one of the biggest things that I'd like to speak to women about, and they know it the most, is they feel it the most, maybe I'll say, is betrayal. It's that, hey, we're not competing in a friendly manner. You are a traitor. You're a backstabber. You're that type of thing is one of the, because we tend to, even if it's made up, okay, let's make up a conflict with Russia, or let's make a conflict with Iran or whatever. I mean, it's all kind of scrambled at this point, but if we did kind of wipe our eyes and get clearer about it, we should have legitimate conflict with those that seek to destroy us or destruct our way of, like that should be natural. That's obviously heroes and warriors want to do that. They're wired for it. For competition, I would like to be more like brothers and sisters, and we're competing to be better. And then for cooperation, obviously, you want to cooperate at a level that has the most impact for the benefit of the persistence over time, because that's what we also get from science, is that kind of everything goes towards a stable relation and it tries to persist. Every organism tries to persist over time. So will crypto help with that? Yes, I think so. I think that we have to reinvent our economies. There's so much that we have to do as meritocratic, like just figure things out and allow other experiments, especially for people. It's not just IQ. It's we get where there's race realism, but there's temperaments. There's this neoteny where we're younger and we have to protect our innocent versus those that grow up faster, or they have a R sexual selection strategy. They're going to reproduce fast. They don't invest in their children. There's just so much like, hey, there's a lot of noise, and let's one of our lines is let 1,000 nations bloom. And it comes from this, like, let people separate, sort, speciate. There's this idea that we talk about disassociation, or the freedom of association. It has really no teeth unless people are able to disassociate. And this whole money game, largely, and people admit it, they like to have money so they can get away from people they don't want to be around. But what does that create? It creates everything we see in second and third world, whereas you have favela areas and you have the ultra rich. And, those aren't good guys win, bad guys get theirs comeuppance. And those are largely the destruction of the middle class, which has so much upward mobility, which is what motivates and incentivizes a lot of people to be productive and somewhat loving and cooperative in the first place. And so whatever the end game is that these fucking globalists are trying to do is destroys all incentives, and it leads towards Armageddon, right? Like I think the Bible hits a lot of points, and one, you kind of have an outcome of Armageddon where there's a massive destruction, which creates lifetime retaliation cycles, or not, if because they do believe in collective punishment when we don't believe in collective punishment. That's another big thing we should separate from people that do that. But the other one is revelations, and revelations, which I think you're doing a lot for, is to reveal, to like, hey, these guys are doing that. They're betraying, they're traitor, they're doing this. People are waking up to a lot of these things. The noticing is becoming mainstream. And I think for good reason, because then we at least giving a 50-50 shot to revelations.
To do something about it. It's going to be interesting. I find the digital asset space, I just want the tape cut so we can have the ability to go in and out as we please and choose the winners. And I don't want the winners chosen like it has been for the last 100 years with this fiat garbage. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't mean,
it'd be different. It'd be different if they were good kings, right? Like, it'd be different if they're good kings and they had beneficial, there was justice, there was order, there was a bestow of blessings, there was a lot of fertility, but there's everything but that, it seems.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe that's part of what, it not necessarily forces it, but I think this brings us full circle to shadow, right? Like we embrace that shadow side of us in this group. One of the other things I was trying to connect was this I'm great and we're great. Kurt did a lot of connection with, hey, life is great. There's so much great that, he figured out from the sciences across, domains. And then I think I have the subjective, like the I'm great, like there's a lot that we can do. But where we're weak, and I'm going to leave this for our audience, is in the we're great. And that's why I would encourage, even with crypto, family coins or whatever, reconnecting with your cousins. Most people have on average 5,000 cousins, extended out to the fifth cousin. So I would like to see that we bring back European villages, bring them back as American villages. We used to have that kind of level of relationship where pretty much everybody in the village was a distant cousin to you. And so you felt more connected. And if you had a problem, that is the jury of your peers. That is your insurance. That is your war band. That is kind of, those three are all within there. And obviously we can see that these villages have maintained over hundreds, if not thousands of years. And it's really only families that can outlive the rise and fall of empires.
Yeah. I grew up in New England, and I just recently went back, and you see, it was funny. I was talking to, I think it was my brother. It was like, or my friend up there, and I was like, the townies, they've got a thing like the townies up there. You've got townies up there, and basically it goes back to the 12th generation originals, Europeans that came over, and their families are still there. And what we've seen over the last many decades is this intent insurgency to break that up. And to disperse it. And like, I did some genealogy on my own history. It goes back 12th generation, 1620, Newbury, Massachusetts, the original, deeded landowner of Newbury. And I grew up in Newbury until I was 19 and then never went back because I got dispersed in this war I find myself in, and we find ourselves in. But I went back, and, you get that towny feel. There's cousins everywhere, they're connected, but they've done a really good job to try to break that up. And you don't really see that in different parts of the country, but up in New England it's interesting to see.
Well, imagine if that we had some sort of organized effort in this family kin and kith, where in MythMatrix, I talk about you need three things. You need interesting characters, meaningful story patterns, and entertaining plots. That you could go through your genealogy. You can pick out your interesting characters. What was the meaningful story patterns they went through, and then the entertaining plots. That's largely what we do when we're storytelling anyway. The uncle, the cousin, the grandpa, or whatever are repeating these for you. But losing that, And I know the same thing was said about music. Like we used to, in a town, European village and that type of stuff, the organization for a little festival or even just heck, a campfire with a couple instruments, that we would sing at a level that was whatever comfortable or fun, and the children would sing off key or maybe they'd perfect pitch. I don't know, whatever. But this whole recording and then professional production. So, and then they have this loudness, like things have been getting louder and louder. It's like, so then we feel inadequate because this perfectly tailored produced song comes out, and then now people don't want to go to choral, or they don't want to, sing around the campfire and stuff like that. We're losing so much. This might tie into Luke's in terms of nature's pressures, is that we give away so much. And that's where that full accounting element, we really do have to do a full accounting. And I'd say that our guys, pretty much more than anybody else I've found in their interwebs, do the most accounting of really looking at the spectrum of costs and stuff and going, hey, maybe that wasn't an optimal idea for us. So I would love for these families, these cousins, to kind of reorganize, claim their stories back. And I will say that if they have negative karma, they should probably address their negative karma, and they should really try to work at that we level, that we're great. They should work at that level to clean up any sort of family mishaps and stuff and try to get things right. Make pledges and promises. I'd love to see confederacies of these families doing it, where they kind of we clean up our own messes, and I'm willing to do that and look at my family lineage. But I want to say full accounting the way, like, not like, so few actually own slaves. I don't want to get into nonsense type stuff. I'm talking where there was actual damages and costs, but dig into it in a way that you kind of try to make it right,
Well, hey, brother, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for everything. Thanks for presenting with us today. I want to have you back. I want to dive deeper. Maybe by the time you come back, we'll have some more regulation on the digital asset space. But everybody, folks, check out Bryan Brey at Bryan Brey, X account below. God bless you, sir. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks. Appreciate it. God bless too.
Folks, check him out. Check out Natural Law Institute. I got the website right here. Check it out. It'll also be in the description below. Also, go over Freedom Fighters 1776. Get more information, get more resources, connect with other patriots. You can also go over Freedom Financial 1776.com and tap into some of this technology that's coming out to be your own bank. As always, it's important to do your own research, folks, and do what's right for you. God bless. Much love. We'll catch you on the next episode.